The Raiders continue to make minor additions to their roster, plus a lot of the draft analysts leaning in the same direction when it comes to the Raiders' first-round pick. That plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 19th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Definitely appreciate you if you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page. We appreciate both. I say it each and every day, and I mean it. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of your support and the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes each and every day, making sure we look good and sound good by way of the Locked On Raider podcast YouTube page. So shout out to Ari. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, you could do that. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We will get back to your calls and texts. We didn't have any yesterday. Had Danny O'Neil part of the show. A really good conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I thought he did a heck of a job telling the story of Pete Carroll. So hopefully you appreciated that as much as I did. But we'll get back to your feedback in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Again, 707-654-4693. And as we're just a little bit over a month away from the NFL draft in Green Bay, a lot of the draft analysts are starting to lean in the same direction. A lot of times we'll hear this player, that player, the third. It seems like everyone's still on the same page now when it comes to the Raiders and what they'll do at number 6. We'll talk about it. We'll let you hear from a couple of the draft analysts, plus we'll go over their latest mock drafts 3.0 when it comes to Mel Kiper Jr. and also Daniel Jeremiah. That's in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, a little bit of roster movement, guys that they re-signed, brought back their own guys, and even a guy that was a former Raider signing with a division rival. I'll tell you about that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show. That's Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So I told you about the Raiders coming to an agreement with Darnay Holmes, the cornerback who played a little bit of the slot corner for Nate Hobbs when he was out with injury in 2024. The Raiders made it official with him returning on a one-year deal. They did that on Tuesday, put out an email. Holmes returns for his second season with the Raiders after playing in 16 games with one start. Recorded 30 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and 3 passes defense. Originally entered the NFL as a 4th-round pick with the Giants in 2020. Appeared in 70 career games with 12 starts over his first 5 seasons. 137 total tackles, 4 picks, 21 passes defense, 5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. So that is the resume of one Darnay Holmes, who returns to the Silver and Black on a one-year deal. And again, especially if you listen to the conversation with Danny O'Neil, younger players are really how Pete Carroll's going to thrive. He really relates to the younger players, able to give them that confidence to have them play at a high level. So you're seeing a lot of these dudes that are being re-signed, brought back to the team, and even guys that are being brought from outside of the building. They might not be the youngest dudes, but they haven't had a lot of time on task, or maybe they're being overlooked. Maybe they're guys that you just kind of look at and say, oh, well, he's only going to be a special team guy, or maybe he's only playing a special team role right now and has an opportunity to play at a higher level and play a bigger role on the defensive side of things. So Darnay Holmes, I do believe, will be part of the mix when it comes to competing for that slot cornerback position that was vacated when Nate Hobbs decided to take his talents to Green Bay. They also re-signed defensive tackle Zach Carter. They put out in the email, originally a 3rd-round pick by the Bengals in 2022. He played in 45 career games with 16 starts, total 68 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, and 3 passes defense. In 2024, Carter posted 22 tackles, a career-high 1.5 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and 1 pass defense in 12 games between the Bengals and the Raiders. And look, he was not good in Cincinnati. There's no doubt about that. He wasn't good, but there's something about Robbie Leonard, the defensive line coach. I talked about him all 2024. I know the results weren't there as far as wins, but it seems like every player that Robbie Leonard got his hands on that defensive line had production. They had guys that they're picking up off of practice squads, had guys that they were bringing in that basically were overlooked, and guys that have been moved on from other teams and had success. So Robbie Leonard had success with defensive tackle Zach Carter. They're bringing him back, and they made that official as well on Tuesday. Today, running back Raheem Mostert, who we found out about, I believe, last week, he will become official today. I know that, as a matter of fact, he'll be available by way of Zoom a little bit later on. I'm not too sure exactly what time, but Raiders PR has alerted us that he's going to be in the building probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, sign his deal, and then they'll make him available by way of Zoom. So that could be at noon, that could be at 12:30, that could be at 1 o'clock. Not too sure. Hell, that could be at 10:45, right? Whenever he gets that done, it's not going to be a long press conference, but Raheem Mostert, the running back who's on a one-year deal, will also be made official today. We also found out on Tuesday about former Raiders center Andre James signed with the LA Chargers. So Andre James, who was released by the Raiders, we know JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, former second-round pick of the Raiders last year. He's going to take over that center spot. Now you expect Andre James, at least I expect Andre James to be the starting center there along that Charger offensive line. So they're trying to build something there. I have a lot of respect for Andre James. He did a lot of really good stuff for the Raiders. He had moments where he wasn't that good, but I have a lot of respect for Andre James. So he's a guy that's a native of LA. He knows all about it, spent his time in college there at UCLA. So now he's going back to the Southern California market as he's a member now of the LA Chargers. They tweeted about it. They were pretty excited, pretty fired up that that he's going to be a part of that offensive line. So Andre James now a member of the LA Chargers. Final nugget I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Talked about Raheem Mostert becoming official today, and he's going to be made available by way of Zoom. Mel Kiper Jr. from ESPN, he's going to have his big draft conference call today, also by way of Zoom. That's going to be this morning. Looking forward to that. Definitely going to have a lot of good sound from that. You know how we do. Grab it, break it down, everything that, pertains to the Raiders, everything that, gives you some insight on some of these draft prospects, we'll bring to the table here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So this morning, Mel Kiper Jr. will be speaking probably about an hour and a half long. Really good stuff. Look forward to that, and I'll be able to bring that to you coming up tomorrow and even Friday if we have a lot of it. I don't know how the actual call is going to go. We'll figure it out. We'll see. But we'll have a lot of good draft conversation. And why not, right? The draft, again, is a little bit over a month away down in Green Bay. So looking forward to that. Speaking of Mel Kiper Jr., he put out mock draft 3.0. So where did he go with the Raiders at number 6? Where did Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network go with the Raiders at number 6 as he put out mock draft 3.0 as well? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. You'll hear from Mel Kiper, and you'll hear from the prospect that they both selected at number 6 for the Silver and Black. That's coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Gametime picks, they make it easy to find the better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever the case may be. They have got you covered. They have amazing deals on some huge matchups that are coming up, and Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find lower prices. They got that lowest price guarantee. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What time is it? Game time. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. One to deep dive into mock draft 3.0, both for Mel Kiper Jr. and Daniel Jeremiah, two guys that I really respect. They put out their work by talking to people around the league. It's not like they just are sitting in their basement, coming up with names, throwing it against the wall, and hoping that they stick. So this is some really good stuff. And as I'm starting to notice, a lot of these mock drafters, these draft analysts, are leaning to the same conclusion when it comes to the Raiders at pick number 6. So first, Mel Kiper Jr., ESPN, does a fantastic job. He'll be doing his draft conference call later on this morning. He put out mock draft 3.0, Cam Ward to the Titans at number 1. That is one that I feel is signed, sealed, and delivered, even though we're still a month away from the draft. My guy, Joe Fortenbaugh from Joe and Q on ESPN Radio, he's actually already placed a bet, got some really good information, some really good intel, and he talks about it on the radio all the time. He's placed a bet that not only will Cam Ward go number 1, but he's going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. So they're going to stick and pick, even though there's been conversations about them wanting to trade out of that spot. They love Cam Ward. He's very comfortable. When you start putting money on it, very comfortable that he's going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. So Mel Kiper has Cam Ward at 1. Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State, going number 2 overall to the Browns. Shador Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado, going number 3 to the Giants. And it's funny because, and this isn't from Mel, this isn't from Daniel Jeremiah, but remember the conversations coming out of the combine? Oh, man, Cam Ward has really separated himself from Shador. Man, he's arrogant. Man, he's brash. He's this, that, and the other. He's really going to drop down the board. Mel's got him going number 3. Right? Which is something that we talked about. I didn't see him getting out of the top 5, top 6 if the Raiders had a say in it, but didn't see him dropping too much. Surely not out of the top 10, even though I saw mock drafts right after the combine saying Shador was going to go number 21 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I never thought that was going to happen. So Shador, according to Mel Kiper Jr., going number 3 to the New York Giants. His college teammate, Travis Hunter, cornerback and wide receiver, going number 4 overall to the Patriots, which tracks with what Mel Kiper told me last week on my radio show. He's not going to go any lower than number 4, so that exactly tracks. Mason Graham, he has going number 5 overall, the defensive tackle from Michigan, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is where the Raiders slide in at number 6. Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. A lot of folks have Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders at 6. Mel Kiper says in his piece, Coach Pete Carroll wasn't waiting until the draft to find his quarterback for 2025. After Las Vegas had the number 13 pick last year, missed on all 6 of the first-round QBs, the team went out and traded for Geno Smith before free agency kicked off. Carroll obviously has history with Smith from their time together in Seattle, knows how to maximize him. But Carroll's teams also have leaned heavily on the run in the past, so I'm giving the Raiders the best player still on my board in Jeanty, number 4 overall. So Jeanty is his number 4 overall player, even though he's going to number 6 to the Raiders. So he has them listed as just overall players, just as far as talented dudes. He's got him as the number 4 as far as talent on his big board. He goes on to say elusiveness, speed, physicality, vision with the ball in his hands. Jeanty really has it all. Rushing for 2,601 yards, 29 touchdowns last season. Plus, he has some pass catching upside with 66 catches over the past 2 campaigns. The Raiders were last in rushing last season, averaging 3.6 yards per carry and 79.8 per game. Jeanty would change everything there and create a solid offense nucleus with Smith, Jacoby Myers, and also Brock Bowers. So Ashton Jeanty, number 6 to the Raiders, according to Mel Kiper Jr. Number 7, Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State to the Jets. Jalen Walker, edge rusher from Georgia, number 8 overall to the Panthers. And then this was the big surprise to me, and this kind of goes back to the quarterbacks. If you see him and you like him, you better get him right away. He has Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, going 9 overall to the New Orleans Saints. So that was something that really stood out to me. A couple other players of note, Ted McMillan, T-Mac, who we talk about, the wide receiver out of Arizona. He has him going number 20 overall to the Broncos, and Amarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina, number 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. So he has 2 running backs in the top 15. And Mel Kiper is a guy that normally doesn't even select running backs in round 1. So he was a guest on First Take on ESPN on Tuesday, and he was asked about Jeanty and Hampton, 2 first-round running backs, Raiders at 6, Hampton to the Cowboys at number 12, and why he selected those 2 guys for those 2 teams.
Well, 2 running backs. And you say, why does Kiper have 2? It's a philosophy. It's not a rating. My rating has Jeanty up at 4 and Hampton at 19. Okay, I had McCaffrey high. I had Zeke high. I had Bijan high. But the philosophy is don't take a running back in the first round. But you don't grade on philosophy, you grade on ability. Jeanty to the Raiders, who couldn't run the football. Pete Carroll wants to do that. Makes sense. Dallas has had success taking first-round running backs. Emmitt Smith, Zeke Elliott. That's what they need, right? They get Amarion Hampton, who's a very underrated running back for what he did at North Carolina. People forgot because North Carolina struggled. They forgot how good he was and how good he was 2 years in a row. Jeanty is a phenomenal running back. So for me now, with Barkley leading the Eagles, helping lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl win, this is a copycat league, and I think people now are getting back to the running back position. I've always said it's critical. It's important. I've always talked about the 2nd through 7th round running backs that you can get. But certainly these 2 running backs are well deserving of going in round 1 and would be major additions to the teams I have them going to.
Mel's thoughts on both guys. The running back, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State for the Raiders at number 6, and obviously Amarion Hampton, running back from North Carolina to the Cowboys at number 12. And I know the Cowboys are really high on Ashton Jeanty, but just doesn't seem like he's going to be available there. Again, all these draft analysts are now really curving to, Ashton Jeanty is going to be the guy for the Raiders at number 6. Daniel Jeremiah put out Mock Draft 3.0. Cam Ward, Miami, right? Going to the Tennessee Titans at number 1. He has Abdul Carter, edge out of Penn State. Number 2 to the Browns. Shador Sanders continues to track. Right, number 3 to the Giants. Everything stays the same. Travis Hunter, cornerback, wide receiver, Colorado to the Patriots at 4. He then has Jalen Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia, going number 5. And again, Ashton Genty from Boise State, number 6 to the Raiders. Armand Mambu, offensive tackle from Missouri, number 7 to the Jets. Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan, number 8 overall to the Panthers. And number 9 to the Saints, Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. Couple players of note, Jackson Dart, he actually had him all the way down at number 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Ted McMillan, T-Mac, Arizona wide receiver, number 22 to the Chargers. But what Daniel Jeremiah says real quickly about Ashton Genty at number 6, the Raiders can take some pressure off Geno Smith by adding Genty, who is one of the top 3 players in the draft. So Mel Kiper Jr. has Genty at number 4. Daniel Jeremiah has Ashton Genty at number 3. And I know that we've had a lot of discussion back and forth about taking a running back at number 6. The only thing I'll say about that, if you're going to go in that direction, because Genty's a heck of a playmaker, we know that. He's a guy that could be a difference maker from the running back position. We see how good running backs can be. We saw what Saquon Barkley brought to the table. We saw what Josh Jacobs brought to the table for the Packers last year. We saw what Derrick Henry brought to the table for the Ravens. We know how good running backs can be and what they can mean. You have to have an offensive line in place. Your offensive line has to be solid. It has to be sure of itself. It has to be able to open up holes. If you're going to have a running back and you're going to use him early and often, don't have him running into the back of his own offensive lineman, or don't have him trying to shake a tackle as soon as he gets the ball like we saw Josh Jacobs do so many times. That's why I've been very hesitant on Ashton Genty at number 6. And to double down, it's a very deep draft when it comes to running backs. So maybe if you get that offensive line shored up, then you go with the running back a little bit later on. But both of these guys, Mel Kiper Jr. and Daniel Jeremiah, have Ashton Genty going number 6. In DJ's mock draft 3.0, he has Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan, going number 8 to the Panthers. I wouldn't have any problem if the Raiders pulled the plug or pulled the trigger there and said, let's get him. Let's go get Mason Graham. I wouldn't have a problem with Ashton Genty either, because he's a very talented dude. But if they went with Mason Graham and they put him next to Christian Wilkins, all of a sudden you make that strength even stronger. You know, the one thing that I know Saquon Barkley showed the NFL what a big running back and a dominant running back means to the team. Well, Philadelphia also showed you what a great pass rush means to a team, the way that they beat up the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, the same argument that many can have for Ashton Genty at 6, I can make that same argument for Mason Graham at 6 if available. Or Jalen Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia, if available, right? And I know he's the edge and Mason Graham's a defensive tackle, so you might not want to over-invest in that position at that point. But the defensive tackle makes a lot of sense. You line him up next to Christian Wilkins, you could really be on to something. But the one thing about Ashton Genty, not only is he a super talent, he's a super dude. A very humble young man. He's a military guy. He's a guy that had an opportunity to leave Boise State, like many players do, go to other big-time programs for big NIL, and chose not to. Here's a little bit of behind the scenes with Ashton Genty, as a matter of fact. In Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine, he was on NFL Network. Again, just about a minute and a half, but this is just kind of getting to know who Ashton Genty is as a young man. Check it out.
Now let's talk about Boise State. You're a unanimous All-American, the first ever in school history, but you did have an opportunity to go in the transfer portal and go make some NIL money elsewhere, but you stayed. Why is that?
I mean, first of all, when they hired Coach Danielson, I knew he was the perfect guy for the job. I love him. I wanted to play for him and nobody else. And then, you know, I had other schools offering me money, but, you know, money isn't everything. You know, I had great relationships with my guys on the team, my coaches, and most importantly, I was going to develop into a great running back, and, you know, we've seen that happen this year.
We did see that happen. I love this one. Your 2,600 rushing yards was more than 115 teams in the FBS. 150, that's like insane.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy.
Are you proud of yourself?
Very, very, very proud. You know, what I was able to accomplish this past season, it's amazing. Sometimes I look back and I don't even know how I was able to do all that.
Do you ever go back to the military base in Italy? I ask that because a lot of people may not know that's actually where you learned to play football. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I haven't been back since I lived there, but you know, I spent 3 years out there, and I played on the varsity team as a freshman, right? So for about a year and a half, I wasn't playing football. I just kind of had to practice, you know, keep getting better on my own. But once I started playing running back there, and I really learned how good I could be, and I started to really develop a passion for the game of football.
I thought that was really cool, man. I mean, again, he had the choice, as many players do, and you see it all the time. You see all these players leaving, going from one program to another, transfer portal, NIL, transfer portal. Genty had that same option, and he stayed at Boise State. Right. And all he did is just put on for his team, put on for his program, found a way to get into the college football playoffs, where a lot of people actually learned who he was. Right. So not everybody was watching Boise State. I'm here in Vegas. Obviously, UNLV is part of the Mountain West. So I'm definitely paying attention to Boise State. I got to see a lot of him, got a chance to talk to him while I was on game night on ESPN radio. So that was cool. Talked to him a couple times. I know what kind of person he is, and obviously a hell of a player. He's very well disciplined, comes from a military family, and as you heard in that piece, learned to play football in Italy. How cool is that? I know he wants to be a member of the Dallas Cowboys, right? He grew up in the Dallas area. One of the many places he grew up was the Dallas area. So that's a natural fit, but he might not be available for the Cowboys at number 12 if these mock drafts, they stay status quo and it ends up being Ashton Genty at number 6, as these guys are predicting. So just kind of wanted to get you updated on that. Again, Mel Kiper Jr. will have his draft conference call today. Then he'll be a guest on my radio show on Thursday on ESPN Radio, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, 9:30 Pacific time. So between all that, we'll have plenty of Mel Kiper Jr. here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts are coming up next. 707-654-4693.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts, draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's get a call in from the 760. He's calling to talk about the offensive line and has a few thoughts and ideas about it. Here it is, a call from the 760.
Hey, Q. I just wanted to call in and kind of address, I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter, but and maybe some other guys that listen to the show share the same idea. But I'm listening to, I believe it's Monday's show, and I'm kind of worried about the fact that we haven't really addressed the offensive line. I was kind of sharing the same idea that there wasn't really a lot of gusto behind that in 2024. And I mean, I feel like we still need to address it. Maybe we will do it in the draft. I'm not really sure though, but I think we definitely need something to help out Geno Smith in the offensive run that we plan to kind of scheme together here. I mean, yeah, we definitely need to kind of get the rebuild going as far as the offensive line, and we need to make some additions, in my opinion. I don't think I don't think they were good. I don't really agree with Pete Carroll on the fact that he thought that they were good in 2024. And then, again, I definitely still think we should go grab either Ward or Shador. Definitely. Have him sit behind, Geno Smith for a year or so and let him rip. I definitely think we should address those two things. I'm not really too worried about if we don't get a quarterback in the draft, but I think it would be a smart idea, too, just to continuously invest in our future. I think it's kind of detrimental to our success going forward to definitely do some serious moves on the offensive line. Again, they could be trying to do that in the draft, but definitely think they have to address that for sure. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's a couple of things I wanted to address. Thanks, Q, for all you do. Love the show. Later.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate you. Next time you got to let me know your name, man. I don't want to just say your area code. I need to know your name. But I understand completely where you're coming from, right? And to that point, if Genty is the pick at 6, like I was just talking about in segment number 2, and you think he's going to be a difference maker, he can, but you have to have that offensive line, right? And even if you don't just get the offensive line for the running back, get the offensive line in place for the quarterback. Right, you got to protect Geno Smith. He was sacked 50 times last season. So that's something that I've been paying attention to. I thought the offensive line of free agency was going to be kind of heavily addressed, and it hasn't. Right? They went out there and got Alex Kappa. He was a guy that got released by the Bengals. They put him, they signed him as far as depth goes. They brought back Jordan Meredith, who did a good job last year. But again, it's kind of dangerous just deciding, just going to go ahead and, draft a couple offensive linemen, maybe plug them and play and let it go. Right? I mean, it would be good to invest some money at the offensive line and really understand if you want to have a chance to win, and you want to have a chance to protect your quarterback and open up holes in the running game, the best way to do it is exactly how Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers did it last year, right? They already have Rashawn Slater in place. Who is their first pick? Joe Alt. Then you saw what they did this offseason. Mekhi Becton, they brought him in as the guard position. Just brought in Andre James, so we'll see how that works out. But we know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. He wants to run the ball, and he wants to protect his quarterback. So what did he do? He addressed the offensive line immediately. I think that the Raiders need to do that as well. That is the one concern that I have, is that they haven't fully addressed the offensive line just yet. But thanks for the call. I definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Jamie from the 805. Q, what up? It's Jamie from the 805 with a quarterback question. If we didn't trade for Geno, I'd be all in on doing whatever for Shador or, if possible, Cam. Since we got Geno and have stability at quarterback for the next season or 3, we don't need to draft a quarterback who could be a day one starter. My question is this: which quarterback in the draft presents the most long-term potential after several seasons as a backup? Sanders and Ward are the most immediately game-ready prospects. I'm wondering whether quarterbacks such as Dart, McCord, Milroe, Ewers, Gabriel, or Howard, or any of the players potentially available in the later rounds, could be as good or better with pro coaching and practice time. I'd like to hear your opinions. The player personnel people you have to have access to. Thanks, man. Love the show. Go Raiders. That's Jamie from the 805. It's a great question. And that's the thing, right? We haven't seen the extension for Geno yet, so we don't know how many years maybe he might be in place as a starting quarterback. So that's kind of, I guess, where I'm at when it comes to the Shador conversation, because, again, if you plan on Geno Smith being the starting quarterback for the next 3 years, then, yeah, I mean, Shador or Cam Ward, neither one of those makes sense, right? Because they're at the most a year, right? I would say you maybe sit them for a year, and that's at best. Right? You probably don't even get past like week 10. I don't know when the bye week's going to be. Obviously, when the schedule comes out, we'll see it. But you might not get past the bye week unless you're having a really good season and, hey, you just keep rolling with the hot hand. So, there's questions there. Now, when we see the extension, I think we'll have a better idea. As far as the other guys that you asked about, when you're looking at Dart, he looks like he's going to be a first-round guy. Mel Kiper had him going number 9 to the Saints. Daniel Jeremiah had him going number 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're both in the first round. Kyle McCord, the young man out of Syracuse, he's a really good player. Saw him up close and personal when he was at Allegiant Stadium playing against UNLV. He's got some really good accuracy, man. He's a guy that you could definitely think about sitting behind Geno for a while. Milroe, I think, is the dark horse. And this is why. I've talked about Milroe a lot. He's a very athletic dude, got a very, very strong arm. If Jalen Milroe is going to be your franchise quarterback, you have to be patient with him. So you're talking about a year or 3. That might be what it takes for Jalen Milroe to grow into a franchise quarterback. He's not ready yet, that's for sure. So, and I don't know how many reps you're going to get as a backup, maybe even probably a third string quarterback. What I would like to see, if the Raiders were to decide to go get Jalen Milroe, I'd like to see him active on game days so they could have a package for him, because he's so stinking athletic. I can imagine him doing, the tush push like Philadelphia does. I can see them getting him out there with some packages where he runs, but then he also has a super strong arm. So if he wants to stretch the field, he could, right? I think about like Colin Kaepernick when he was with the 49ers originally, when Alex Smith was still there and Jim Harbaugh was the coach and they had packages for him. I could see that with Milroe, but him turning into a franchise quarterback right away is not going to happen. But if you want to sit him for a year or 2 and let him learn the position, maybe he could develop into something like that. But I know for a fact he's not ready just yet. So that's a guy that you could probably feel comfortable sitting for a while. Dylan Gabriel, he might be. Quinn Ewers, I'm out on. I just don't think he's a NFL quarterback. I thought he should have gone to North Carolina when it sounded like that they had a chance to go and give him some NIL money and he could transfer there. I thought that's where he should go. Will Howard, I've heard good things about him. Like I heard that the Raiders like him. But I also heard that Chip Kelly knows everything he does really well and also things that he doesn't do really well. So I don't know if that'd be in on him. But Milroe's the one I would say, man, is the dark horse. I'd pay attention to that one for sure. That's a potential, and you don't have to feel rushed to put him on the field because everyone knows he's not ready. So, Jamie, thanks for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from SD Raider, that's San Diego Raider. He's calling to ask about the running back position. Also talks about training camp. Here he is, San Diego Raider.
Hey, what's up, Q? SD Raider here. just wanted to reach out. Had a question about running back position, and Pete Carroll also had just a thought as a San Diego native myself. First one, Cam Scatterboo. Cam Scatterboo, however you want to pronounce his name. I got to say, with Pete Carroll and this new regime, I feel like nobody's really talking about him as much as I thought they would. I'm with you on drafting Shador or that wide receiver from Arizona. But if we don't do that, or if we do that, better yet, Cam at second round or third round, if he's available, I say we take him, because if size and speed is what they're looking for at the running back position, then why wouldn't you take somebody like that? He's got size, he's got speed. And if players with Pete Carroll really thrive between years 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, I would want the most out of this guy right here. He's a killer. So, next point, I feel like the San Diego market is super hungry for some football team to come in, step in. It's not going to be the Rams. It sure is not going to be the Chargers. Where I grew up in Logan Heights, none of the homies over there like the Chargers anymore. What we like and what we want is the Raiders. So I would do a preseason camp down in SD, really cultivate that area. The San Diego fans right now, they love the Padres, but as soon as baseball season's done, they're just basically tuning in to cheer for whoever the Chargers are playing against. And they already hate Kansas City. They do not like the Chiefs. What does that line up with? I think it lines up with the Raiders. Just a thought. Love what you do, Q. God bless you. Bless your family. Praying for you. And, yeah, keep doing what you think. As me and my family love to say, in the mall, in Knott's Berry Farm, wherever we're at, Disney, down by the beach, whatever. Raiders.
SD, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. Yeah, Scatterboo is a hell of a back, right? He's probably a late second round, early third round guy, I would say. There's no doubt. And you want to talk about a guy that looks like a Raider, that would be him, right? I mean, that dude's just tough. He's physical. He's strong. He's got enough speed. I mean, he's just one of those guys. He would be a good 1-2 punch. He'd be good, a really good part of, like I said, almost like a Napoleon Kaufman, Tyrone Wheatley type. And maybe not even that. Maybe he'd be more of a, I don't want to say Zach Crockett, because Zach Crockett was truly just a, goal line back, but he could be that guy, that real true short yardage guy. I think the Raiders are going to come out of this draft with a couple running backs. I really do, which is, again, going back to why I haven't been so adamant about you got to go get Ashton Genty at number 6, because there's so many running backs in this draft. But I can see Scatterboo definitely being a part of a 1-2 punch. We got to see him at Arizona State. We got to see him in the playoffs and really push Texas to the limit, right? If it wasn't for Scatterboo, Arizona State's not even close in that game. But because of him, they pushed him to overtime and just about won that bad boy, but came up a little bit short. As far as training camp goes, San Diego would be cool because of the weather. I just don't know as far as the rights to the area. I would think that it's clear. Last year when they were in Costa Mesa and I was there, it's a 75-mile radius, and the Chargers and the Rams still have those rights within 75 miles of where they are. Their home base, I should call it, like their training camp and everything. If you're within 75 miles, that's their territorial rights. So the Raiders couldn't advertise that they were there for training camp. We couldn't talk about it on the radio like, man, we're here in Costa Mesa. The weather's great, da-da-da-da. We couldn't really do that, even though we did. We're not allowed to. You couldn't invite fans out. There was a very small select member of the fan base. I remember Tom Telesco, and I know he's not part of the organization anymore, but Tom Telesco said, we won't be back here next year. And he said, we want to be somewhere where we can invite the fans to come in, have that energy and that juice every day at training camp. And they weren't able to have that this year because of the territorial rights. So I don't know if that means they go back to Napa. I don't know if that means they go to Reno. I don't know if that means they go to San Diego. I don't know what that means where they're going to go. But wherever they go, they've got to have the rights to that area, or it'd be an area that nobody has the rights to, so they can do exactly what I just said. Bring the fans in, talk about being there, advertise being there. There was a day, the first day that we were there in Costa Mesa, something was going on where the internet connection was not set up, so we couldn't do our radio shows from the actual field that they were playing at. And I remember we had a guy from a local restaurant that knew that we were going to be there with Raider Nation Radio 920 and said, hey, Q, bring your equipment over here. You could broadcast from my restaurant. And I was like, great, cool. And before I did it, and thank goodness, the Raiders called me and were like, wait, you can't do that because then you're going to say that, hey, I'm over at so-and-so restaurant, and that's advertising, and then we're going to get busted. So we weren't even able to do that. So I had to go back to the Airbnb and do my show. That was just the first day. But there was like nothing we can do to even say that we were there, even do our own radio shows from a restaurant, because they said, well, why is the radio station in Costa Mesa? Well, there because the Raiders are there. So it was a big mess, and they don't want to do that again. So they'll go somewhere, I'm sure. I don't think it'll be in Henderson. I think they'll go somewhere, but the question is where. San Diego could be a really good option. Thanks for the call. I definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Fitzy in New Hampshire. Just got time for a couple more. Hey, Q, I spent some time looking at all Pete Carroll's drafts with Seattle and then going back to each draft and looking at who was available after he selected. He only drafted 2 quarterbacks over the entire span he was there. I think his comments about what he expects from his quarterbacks was very telling, that he doesn't value a Superman-type quarterback. He pretty much said you build up a roster around a quarterback, not the other way around. I don't expect him to draft a quarterback at all in this draft, especially not at least until round 3. He's probably going to go defense or offensive line in the first round. If we stay at 6, I bet the pick is Mason Graham. Thanks for hearing me out. Go Raiders. Fitzy from New Hampshire. Thanks so much, Fitzy. Appreciate you. And yeah, the comments that he made when I asked him about the quarterback position and others have asked him, he's not looking for Superman. And I don't think there's any Superman in this draft. I don't think Shador's Superman. I just think he's a really good quarterback, right? That's the difference. Like there's, you know who's Superman in the league? Josh Allen. You know who's Superman in the league? Joe Burrow. You know who's Superman in the league? Patrick Mahomes. Like those are Supermen in my opinion, right? And then there's really good quarterbacks. I think that, Cam Ward, I think Shador, I think, maybe Jackson Dart have chances to be really good. Others could be good, like a Jalen Milroe. He probably in over time could become a good quarterback, not a elite quarterback. So that's the difference. So I don't think you're wrong at all. I just think that they're definitely going to draft a quarterback at some point just to compete with Aiden O'Connell and Geno Smith as well. Provide a little bit of heat. And if Shador happens to drop to number 6, which I don't think he will, and obviously the mock drafts that we went over in segment number 2, they don't think he will either. It looks like they slotted in at number 3 with the New York Giants. Then I think that the Raiders would heavily think about it just because he could end up being that guy and could be really good for Las Vegas in general to try to get some juice in that building that is Allegiant Stadium. But thanks so much. Mason Graham's not a bad selection. If available at 6 and they take him, you ain't going to see me complaining. That would be a really, really good, pick at number 6 as far as I'm concerned. I've said it before, whoever the Raiders get at 6, they have an opportunity to get an absolute dog, right? They have an opportunity to get a blue chip player, and that's what you want if you're picking as high as number 6. I got a call from Jacob from Wilmington. He's calling to talk about what he hopes the Raiders do in the draft in round 1 and who he has his eye on. Here he is, Jacob from Wilmington.
Hey, Q. Hey, Ari. Hope you fellas are doing all right. Hope you had a safe and happy St. Patrick's Day and everything. Anyways, I'm doing laundry right now, and I'm watching tape on this kid named Tyler Shug. He's from Louisville, and I think this kid's a first-round talent, and I really hope we trade back in the draft. Like, that's what I want to do the most. I don't want to stay at 6, so if we could find a trade partner, that would be amazing. So trading back is kind of like what I want to do. And if we got the kid out of Louisville, I know Raider Nation might go up in arms about it, but the kid can play. He's a first-round talent. Anyways, what do you think about it, Q? All right. Later, fellas. Just win.
Jacob, thanks so much. Tyler Shook is who you're referring to, the quarterback for Louisville. He's one that Louis Riddick is very high on. As far as trading back, you can do that, but I think it's not really worth the risk of missing out on a blue chip player. Like I was just talking about who you can get at number 6. I think you want that opportunity. I think you want the opportunity to get a blue chip player. I don't think you get that if you trade back. If you're trading back from 6, how far back are you going to go? 10, 9, around that area? I don't know if you're going to get that blue chip difference maker at that spot. You might. but you also might not, right? You might miss out on the guy that you're really targeting. So I've never been huge on trading back just to trade back, right? I think that you can add some really good talent there at number 6, regardless if you go quarterback, cornerback, wide receiver, running back, offensive line, D tackle. Like I just rattled off 6 different positions right there. You can do that without having to trade back. You can just get that blue chip player and feel good about yourself moving forward. But Jacob, thanks so much. And yeah, keep on watching out for Tyler Shook. Again, he's a guy that at least heading into the combine, he was getting a lot of love from guys like Louis Riddick and others. So pay attention to what he's got going on. He's been around the college game for a minute, so he's got a lot of experience under his belt. That's for sure. Up next, got a text from Jason in Colorado. It says, hey, Q, Jason in Colorado wanted to comment on trading for Geno Smith and add a new wrinkle. My reaction to it, like most of the nation, I imagine, was confusion and possibly disappointment. However, after seeing the freedom it gives us in free agency and the draft concerning quarterbacks and looking at how he last played, it started to seem like a sneaky good move. Then a thought occurred to me. His career reminds me more than a little of Rich Gannon's. Geno also on a team that wasn't good and he underwhelmed for years. Then moved on to a team where he actually performed and and won games. But for some reason, the new team also let him go. Then finally came to an organization where the coach and OC had faith in him, were willing to devise an offense to his strengths and surround him with better playmakers. It may not turn out the same, but for years I wished that the next Rich Gannon would walk through those doors. Geno seems to be as close as we've come so far, and I'm actually excited now to see what we have in our new QB. That's Jason in Colorado. Thanks for the text. The funny thing is, how many people have been trying to find the next Rich Gannon? How long have we been talking about the next Rich Gannon? Even people were talking about, Gardner Minshew might be the next Rich Gannon. Like, it seems like I'm not talking about you, but it's just like, it seems like every time the Raiders get a quarterback that's not, their franchise quarterback or a draft, ever since Derek Carr was moved on from, it's like, oh, Jimmy G, he could be the next Rich Gannon. His career is kind of similar to Rich Gannon. Well, Gardner Minshew, he could be the next Rich Gannon. His career is kind of similar. And now, you're talking about Geno Smith. I think Geno Smith has a chance to be really good. I really do. I know that Pete Carroll has a lot of confidence in him. He knows what to get out of him. He knows what to expect from him. And there's a sense I got that Geno really wants to be a Raider anyway and be with Pete Carroll. The Seattle Seahawks offered him a contract extension. He didn't like it, and he didn't give a counteroffer. So to me, if you don't give a counteroffer, that kind of means that you don't really want to be there. So I think that there was a sense of him wanting to be with Pete Carroll because he gets the most, and Pete Carroll gets the most out of Geno Smith. So thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And if he ends up having the success of Rich Gannon, let's go, right? That would be a great thing because obviously Rich Gannon was the last great quarterback that the Raiders had as he was a league MVP. We'll close things out with a call from Brother Dre in the A. He's calling to talk about the overall direction of the team and also a player he has his eye on that is currently on the Raiders roster. Brother Dre in the A.
What up, Q? It's Brother Dre in the A, dealing with this horrible Atlanta traffic this morning, man. But hey, listen, I like the way the direction that the team is going right now. I feel like under Tom Telesco as GM, at least, we kind of went from kind of like childhood to kind of being responsible adolescents maybe. But I feel like under Pete Carroll and Spytech that we're more like really more like grown-ups now when it comes to more of a pragmatic approach in how the overall roster is being constructed. I look forward to what they're going to do in the draft as well this year. One player in particular that I'm kind of interested in getting your take on is I've always been kind of, I had kind of I kind of like the Camryn Richardson. With the physical tools that he has, I think he has the ability to be a really great player in the NFL, and I'm hoping that through under Pete Carroll's tutelage that he can kind of really grow and develop into something. I think that he seems like the type of player that Pete Carroll would really like. I wanted to get your take on it. I don't know if they're talking about him at all, if during meetings or whatever, if you're hearing anything about his development. I know, they got other fish that they need to fry right now, but I was just really thinking about him when it comes to, with Pete Carroll being a defensive coach and kind of what he wants that defense to be, how Camryn Richardson might fit into that. Anyway, take care, Q, and I just appreciate all that you do for the nation. You are truly a blessing to us, man. You take care. Dre out.
Brother DRE, thank you for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, to me, it does feel like the direction of the team is going really good, right? It feels like there's an adult in the room. It feels like that they're going to be not a, unserious team, not for entertainment purposes only, but a serious team. It looks like they're making smart decisions and serious decisions. I go back to the Max Crosby extension. think about this. It was like a week and a half ago where he was the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history at $35 million a year. Then 4 days later, Myles Garrett came along, got his contract extension. Then you got another contract extension for Jamar Chase, and you got Micah Parsons on the way. Like, that was a smart, serious organization decision to get Max Crosby done when they did. If they had waited 4 days, think how much more money they would have had to spend. Right? I mean, so again, they just seem like they're making smart decisions. Free agency, they haven't gone out and wowed anybody. Nobody's like, oh my gosh, the Raiders are killing it in free agency. But they're getting guys that are sound, guys that have something to prove, guys that have chips on their shoulders, guys that are physical, guys that love the game of football, and they're paying, less than a third of the price of what these other guys are getting out on the free agent market. Like, Trayvon Merritt got $51 million. Jeremy Chin got 2 years and $16 million. Right? I mean, think about that. That's a big-time savings, right? You got E-Rob, right? 1 year deal, right? You're seeing Lonnie Johnson Jr., 1 year deal. You're seeing all these guys, Eric Stokes, 1 year deal. These guys are getting all prove-it deals. So those are smart moves. These guys are hungry. They want to go and get that big payday. And the Raiders are saying, hey, we'll give you a platform to do it. You just got to go out there and make it happen. As far as DK Richardson, I'm glad you brought him up. Nobody's talking about him. The former 4th-round pick. You know what he has? Size and speed. You know what Pete Carroll loves in his cornerbacks? Size and speed. You know what those Legion of Boom cornerbacks had? Size and speed. You're picking up what I'm laying down? Size and speed is an element that Pete Carroll loves and a trait that he's always looking for in his cornerbacks. I'm really intrigued by that because you brought that up. I wasn't thinking of DK Richardson. He got a lot of burn last year as a 4th-round pick, right? He got out on the field a lot, especially after you saw Jacorian Bennett go down. And there was a lot of, woof, or that's not a good day at the office for DCAM. But he got a lot of seasoning. He got a lot of experience even as a rookie. Now all of a sudden you're going to get some really good tutelage from Pete Carroll. Played the position, loves the position, helps develop that position. You might be onto something, man. DCAM might end up being that guy. It could very well end up being Jacorian Bennett and DCAM, right? But DCAM's going to have to battle with Stokes. They're going to have to battle with Jack Jones. I mean, there's going to be some really good competition as far as I'm concerned. But, man, you just ramped that up, bringing up DK Richardson. So thanks so much for that. Great mic drop moment on today's show. So that's going to do it as we're running out of time. And my man Ari's like, you're overtime, Q. You're definitely overtime. But that's how it happens sometimes here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So, again, Mel Kiper Jr. has his draft, his pre-draft conference call today. Really good stuff. Get a hold of that, break some of that down, bring it to the show tomorrow. We'll get more calls and texts. We'll get more news and notes. Raheem Mostert will become official today at some point. Maybe Geno Smith, an extension, is going to be announced today as well. We'll find out sooner rather than later, but we'll bring you all the news and notes. We'll have all the conversation. We'll get your calls and texts and a lot more, and we'll do it on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.